A very good morning to you all and welcome to the AFI Group webinar on the MEWP incident prevention. My name is Brian Parker and I'm the Business Development Manager Technical Support for the AFI Group of companies. The running time of this morning's webinar is around about 45 minutes very big thank you for you making the effort to join us this morning. It is bank holiday weekend, so hopefully you're going to have a great time. Obviously for the weekend, I'm not saying for this webinar. We're going to have a short question and answer session at the end. You do have your opportunity to put your questions to me. So if you feel as though there's questions that you want to ask, you can type in the questions and I'll endeavour to answer as many as I can at the end of the webinar. For those that I can't answer in the time, I will look to respond to you after the webinar. Okay, so just to introduce myself, as I said, Business Development Manager. I am a member of the UK Country Council, to which I also sit on the IPAF Training Committee. I have been a past Training Committee Chairman. I'm also a member of the CPA Strategic Forum Plant Safety Group, to which we meet sort of 3 or 4 times a year, which is specific to MEWPs. And recently I've been co-opted onto the BSI committee for the rewrite of BS 8460, which is the MHE 1211. That is a code of practice for the safe use of MEWPs. So some of you will probably have that. It was first written in 2005. It's long overdue an overhaul. So thankfully BSI now are taking that on board. I've been a senior instructor for IPAF for over 18 years and various working at height committees. Probably very proud to say I'm ex-Royal Engineers plant operator, hence how I got into the plant game working at height and machinery. Okay, so the agenda today, just really to go through the aims and objective of today's webinar, is really to take a walk through the main reported incidents which have happened in our industry, but more importantly how you as clients and duty holders can prevent them. We'll briefly look at some fatal incidents, as these have already been published, and look at accidents and incidents which have been reported by members and contractors to the IPAF accident database. Now my view is that you need to be aware of these main incidents and accidents, so you can prepare yourself within your respective companies. But please remind yourself as I'm going through the webinar that some of these which I've highlighted could also affect your operators. So operator errors, operator incidents, accidents. Also be mindful that when machines are delivered by rental companies, the driver also could have an incident which is on your site, it goes on your statistics, and you may all find that you may have a bit of responsibility there. So my final thought here is for want you to consider and think about your respective businesses. Now MEWPs undoubtedly have made working at height safer and reduced accidents, but they also come at their own risk and liability when they're hired and used. While we're going through this webinar, I want you to question that when you hire in or use MEWPs, do you consider and treat them as normal hired in plant within your business? Now if you consider that, yeah, it's just a piece of plant, it's a dumper, it's a roller, it's a bowser, whatever you want to call it. I'd challenge that. In my view, MEWPs should be considered as a specialist area which requires dedicated, passionate people who are both knowledgeable and experts on MEWPs. Because in my opinion, MEWPs are not just hired in plant, it goes a lot more than that. So, the IPAF accident database, I'm not certain that many of you will know about this, and if you don't, then I'm kind of introducing this for the first time to you. Prior to this, the MEWP industry, we pretty much had an unknown level of accidents and incidents, and these often, incidents, came to light through safety alerts and incidents which have been highlighted by main contractors, some powered access companies, and unfortunately the media. Now, for the right reasons, they felt it wise to share their incidents, and this brought some of these issues to light. The only downside, and still to this day, the only downside of some of these incidents when they're being reported is they are often reported multiple times, potentially due to rebranding of incidents and safety alerts. I've seen one machine on an incident, and I'm sure some of you have who will be listening to me now, seen an incident, and suddenly you've got another contractor who's taken their name off the top of it and put an additional name on there, or their own name. So you suddenly feel as though you've got two accidents or two incidents, and it's aesthetically it's the same machine. So it does cause confusion in the industry, and clearly does give concern for some of the branding of the manufacturers. Now, there are some serious incidents and fatalities which have led to the creation of devices such as secondary guarding for MEWPs. And fair play, that's came out. We've got that now. We all, hopefully we understand secondary guarding. Incidentally, if you don't understand too much about secondary guarding, you can look back at one of my previous webinars where I did tiers of secondary guarding. But the upside to that is we've then now got subsequent guidance in managing secondary guarding's use and when it should be used. All right, but I still emphasise this is really only scratching at the surface of accidents and incidents, and we as an industry have got more to do. Hence why this accident incident database came to fruition, and it is clearly what IPAF stands for. So it was evident that IPAF members wanted to improve safety, not only within their own companies, because we do have accidents, but also within their clients and within the supply chain. So and I was there at the time when the UK Country Council, that's the IPAF UK Country Council, made it mandatory to report accidents and incidents which are MEWP related, and that was for their membership. Somewhat contentious, but I do not believe that contractors and all MEWP rental companies are still reporting all their incidents and accidents. And it does sadden me because we'll go through the incidents and accidents, albeit briefly today. I think that's scratching at the surface of some of the incidents that's happened. Remember, the incident does account for anything else where no harm occurs, and would also include a near miss with a MEWP. We need to know about these folks so that we can reduce potential serious incidents later on. So if you do having these, please report them. With the IPAF incident database, they are and do remain confidential, and that is managed by IPAF. I was the working group of the accident incident database last year now, and even though I was involved with it, I did not know which companies had for example, a driver fall off the back of the truck. It just said driver fell off the back of the truck, and the injury that person sustained, and obviously mitigating factors, etc. Now, if you do wish to participate in this, and contractors are registered on this, incidentally, then you can register your interest on the ipaf.org website. Website's there in the middle of the page. The more information we get, the more likely we can potentially look at changing and shaping the training courses, the guidance that's out there that's making it easy for yourselves to manage MEWPs on a daily basis. So we're just going to look at some fatal data. Now, IPAF's technical officer Chris Wraith began by trawling through worldwide fatal MEWP reports for evidence. Now, these statistics which are on the screen and you can see there were the 2013 stats, which were then revised and updated in 2014 when new information came to light. One point to note is, and Chris will always state, is that the fatalities indicated there's no way at the time of ascertaining if the person using the MEWP were trained to use the MEWP. This is worldwide. So I think we can surmise here that there will be some people who will have been trained, and consequently some people who will not have been trained. What level of training that person had is yet to be determined, but unfortunately there will be some people here who have had little training or familiarization of the MEWP prior to that we're using. So there is big challenges ahead. Now, the graph shows the incidents which have either been reported to IPAF, like I say, or they've found out through the media, and companies which are associated members with IPAF. So that it's no surprise really to show that with 47 deaths from falls from height, that is still the biggest issue that we have. And you can see there that in terms of split there, with overturns, entrapment, electrocution, impact, falling objects, and mechanical or technical. 33 deaths from overturning of MEWPs, 27 deaths from entrapment, so being crushed or pressed against another object, 17 deaths from electrocution. So as you can see, there's still quite a few challenges ahead to reduce this number from IPAF. Now, you might be thinking, crikey, that's a lot of fatalities, but what we do need to do is put this into context. This is worldwide, and it's estimated that there are over 1.1 million MEWPs worldwide, which when you apply this to a daily utilization of MEWP use in 2014 would equate to circa 182 million working days. So, as you can see, that's relatively low, but, clearly still too many deaths. The true accuracy of the data, though, cannot be guaranteed where appropriate. And action is always taken to try and identify the facts. So the data that you see there is often amended and updated, some tweaks, and should relevant information then become available. And it's not a definitive report on all fatal accidents in the world within that specified time period. It's only what's really reported to to IPAF at the time. So when we drum down into the incidents, though, and look further into the fatalities by type, you can see that the majority of fatal incidents, as I said earlier, were falls from height. And it's no surprise to see that this is taken up by boom type MEWPs. But interestingly, it sees it's very close between static boom and 3B or mobile type booms. Now, if you'd said to me before there would have been an even split, I probably wouldn't have believed you. I would have been sort of more erring to the side of boom type, which are mobile boom type, due to the flex when travelling and elevated. But as you can see, unfortunately, that's not the case. So next to the next group there is overturns. Now it's pretty even between mobile booms and scissors, with the remainder being taken up by static booms. Now I've done a previous webinar on ground conditions, so again, if you want to have a little bit more information about some of the risks involved, suggest that you have a look on there, and they're free to listen to. Don't cost you anything. Entrapment. Always remember that we look at entrapment, and it's no surprise there to see that mobile booms are highest on the list, and that's because we always need to remember that the speed an elevated boom can raise when travelling over uneven ground is actually astonishing, and highlights the fact that when we rely on secondary guarding devices to protect the operator, that we may in fact find that it does very little in anything to protect the operator due to the rapid raising of the platform. Electrocutions, you can see there quite an even split between sort of 3Bs and 1Bs, but most of these were in the United States, with a few in Europe and Asia. Obviously in the States they have a seriously different way of pushing their electrical supply around the world and around their country, to say, so it's very much different to what we have in the UK. So evidence suggests that the biggest contributing factors to falls whilst using a boom type MEWP. So why? And you think about booms, we've got to think of things like boom swinging, jolting, or tilt-aways from the machine's centre of gravity. So we're thinking, if we're looking at there, we're thinking of things that people have done to get into that position. They've extended the reach in the platform. They've clearly either not been using personal fall protection devices. There has been occasions where the machine has been struck at the base, and because of the fact that the person in the platform has not worn or clipped onto their anchor point, they've been ejected out the platform. Climbing out of the platform, gain a little bit extra height, or even down to situations like tying up or securing the gates open, with materials dangling out them. Obviously ground conditions are going to be an important factor, but also one that I want to just sort of mention is also machines that have been snagged on an obstruction. So where they've caught maybe a part of the platform on a steel work and not realized it, and then attempted to try and sort of move the machine, not realizing the inertia and the stress that they've caused on the platform. And unfortunately, if it lets go, it's going to go like a catapult, and unfortunately that has caused people to be ejected out the platform. So do a little bit of a survey now, and what I'm going to ask you now is, where do you think that most type of incidents happen? So you can see now your survey come up, and what I would like you to do now is just click on the area where you think that most of the incidents happen. Just a bit of an involvement here to get you involved. So I can see you viewing and the poll's in progress, so come on, get your buttons clicking. It's going up and down. It looks like EU referendum here, up and down. Not this is politically motivated. Alright, great. Okay, so that's everybody's got involved with that. That's super, thank you. Oh, some are changing their mind. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2. Okay. Okay, and now I'm just going to ask you to another question. In relation to the reported instance, what was found to be the biggest cause? Okay, so again, if you would like to now just put your thoughts there while I have a drink. And this is really sort of just to gauge where things are, because this is all, as you would expect, this is about perception and having a look at some of the incidents that we look at shortly will give you an idea. So still waiting for a few people to vote. %, 86%. I'll give you another 10 seconds. Okay, right. Thank you very much for those of you that got involved. We'll go through them a little bit later on. So, if I now look at the analysis of the accidents and incidents that were reported to IPAF, the total number of incidents reported to the IPAF accident database was 428. Now, it's worth pointing out that the lion's share of these were from MEWP rental companies, with a small selection of contractors reporting MEWP-related incidents and accidents. Therefore, it would be expected to that most of these were to delivery drivers, engineers, and obviously for some of the MEWP operators. But also other people that were injured was office staff and vehicle-mounted MEWP operators, because they were separated out to operators, and the reason being is a vehicle-mounted operator is sometimes a person who is dedicated to a truck, so they're on it constantly. Now, the type of accidents which occurred were mainly when the MEWP was operating. Now, and I'm basing this on the fact that MEWP was either driving and manoeuvring. There are also those serious incidents when the machine was being unloaded, or actually being transported. Now, we'll look at sort of categories of persons shortly, but you can see some of these types of injuries, certainly crushing and fractures, potentially some of these are life-changing, and we've got to take that into consideration. So 152 were to delivery drivers, 105 to engineers, and 90 to operators. So again, you're going to have some rental companies there who reported contractor-based incidents because they'd heard that Joe Bloggs working for AB Steel Erector had injured himself whilst using a boom type MEWP. So just be mindful of that. Again, it's about getting factual data and making sure that we understand what these, what's happening and how they're happening. So now we're going to look at the short breakdown of each category. Drivers. These were mainly injuries sustained when either securing machines, and incidents range such as tripping over chains, falling on the beds of trucks and injuring themselves, musculoskeletal injuries to the trunk and the upper limbs through the physical effort of securing machines with either chains and straps. We even had a couple of injuries occur from people walking into machines themselves, so not looking where they're going. Contractors or operators, again you can see there, again similar sort of thing. The only other injuries, there was a couple of injuries not classified, and these were actually down as other. So I only know a certain part of my body that I wouldn't actually have it on a list, which is other, which is my personal area. So in fact, there was a couple of injuries which actually to a person's private parts. So enough to make your eyes water. Engineers, exactly the same. You would expect that there's going to be some issues there in terms of engineers getting injuries, but also as well, we did have injuries to the eyes. So eye injuries were a common scenario. So giving you an idea of these now, you can see there that you can see the eyes, the heads, the lower limbs. The not knowns, well, I'm afraid if I was injuring myself, I'd kind of want to, I think I'd know where I'd been injured. but you can see that 2 people from contractors had another part of their body which they weren't prepared to tell you where it happened. And not unsurprisingly, you can see a high level to the driver and the engineer to the trunk, and equally to the upper limbs. Now, again, you might be thinking, well, I'm more concerned about a contractor, but why should I be really concerned about a delivery driver or an engineer? Well, don't forget they do come onto your site, or potentially do come onto your site from time to time. So being aware of this, helps you understand that they're another potential aspect that you may need to manage. So, as a snapshot of the 152 incidents which happened to drivers, there were 18 occurrences of insecure load. You only have to look on the web these days, www.vertical.net, and often, you'll get incidents where, loss of a load off the side of the truck on the motorway, on a roundabout. Definitely happens in a depot. So, machines slipping off the side of a loading vehicle, and unfortunately has happened on site. There was one tragic occurrence not so long ago where a track-mounted machine slipped off the bed of a truck, and unfortunately the driver was killed, but that was on a public road. So again, just food for thought. 14 occasions where the MEWP tipped over between the vehicle ramps whilst the machine was being either loaded or unloaded. Now, this is sometimes due to the fact that drivers are, they'll take the easy route, dare I say it. So instead of putting their ramps together, they'll try and drive a, small electric scissor or push-around type machine down one ramp, without either taking the time to centralize the ramps, or even the fact that the company that they're working for didn't have full ramps. There were occasions where the winch wasn't used in the system of loading and unloading of electric or push-around type MEWPs. So we've got issues there where machines coming off the back of a truck and suddenly, it's running away on them. 13 incidents from securing loads, and 12 incidents where the machine hit another stationary object. So, I've been to incidents before where the MEWP's actually been winched on by the driver, and he's, the winch overrun, or he's distracted, and he's ended up sort of, smacking into the vehicle that is already loaded on the bed of his truck. 10 incidents where the MEWP collided with some other object. So when the delivery driver is collecting his machine, he's either reversed into the building, he's run into parked cars, he's run into other vehicles, whilst he's been loading it. So again, we know already as an industry, this is our highest risk for delivery drivers. So that's not only when they're on our location, but they're in your location too. So be mindful that this is something that should be controlled. People should have had the training, and we'll go on to that a little bit later on. Engineers, bizarrely, hand tools was the biggest cause. I say bizarrely, probably no surprise really, but some 21 incidents recorded with the trusty hammer being the weapon of choice. So 21 engineers decided to either hit themselves on the head with a hammer, or I would have thought it's probably going to be more on the thumbs and the hands, and missing what they're hitting the legs. 16 occurrences of slips and trips, and 11 engineers were made contact with the machine. 4 were actually hit by a machine component, so stored energy that's been ejected from a machine, or pinging out and hitting them. Now if you look at that again, why am I mentioning this? You have breakdowns on your sites, you have on-site thorough examinations, or you also may have servicing of MEWPs depending on how long the machine's on your site. They come to your gate, your site, they get access, they've done their induction, and then basically they're away onto the site and doing what you want. Are they escorted? Do they need to, what risk assessments and method statements have been checked prior to the use? What materials are they using? So they're the kind of things I just want you to be aware of. Now there were 25 occurrences which I didn't notice, where the incident had no MEWP involvement. So bizarrely, in terms of that, if there was no MEWP involvement, there was some other thing involved. In terms of the operator analysis, 22 were from not having good observation, or being partly obscured due to the work progress. Concerningly, 13 were from mechanical or component failure. So it's a broad statement here. As I said and I mentioned earlier, we're never told what actually failed due to the confidentiality of the reports. But if we take a sort of look at this, it's going to be sort of items such as platform and failure of boom assemblies, scissor sections, wheel and wheel assemblies. It's something that's failed, and it's obviously raised a safety alert due to the fact that it's been reported. 10 occasions where the MEWP lowered on its own. Okay, so what's this? Is it a failed switch, a failed controller? But what kind of pre-use checks have we done? What function checks have we done? What is your company's procedures for carrying out pre-use checks and function checks? Have you got a report that you can use? Have you got dedicated procedures in place? Function checks, once we've carried out the pre-use checks of the machine, we should make sure that it works. And unfortunately, far too often I'll see a person basically put the key in the ground controls, pull out the red emergency stop and climb in the platform. When questioned, yeah, I've checked my base and everything, but you haven't checked that it goes up, rotates, it goes up and it comes back down, and of course, have we checked the emergency systems on the machine? And of course, have we got somebody else who's trained to get the machine down in case something goes wrong? Ground conditions, there were 5 occurrences where the ground obviously was a contributing factor in terms of the machine failing. So what's the gross weight of the machine, and more importantly, what's the point load of each wheel or stabilizer on the ground? Have we built in safety factors? Outriggers, stabilizers, we had 2 occurrences where the machine actually lifted its stabilizer or outrigger whilst the machine was in use. So clearly there was something wrong with this machine or these machines. So why wasn't this picked up the pre-use check, the function check stage? So you look at that and you think, yeah, there's got to be something seriously wrong if an outrigger or stabilizer is lifting up on its own accord. And lack of familiarization, I can see that was the most common reason why you thought that these incidents occurred, and I probably agree with you. If anything, I think most people are quite proud of the fact they'll say, oh yeah, I know how to use that machine, but the reality of it, we're all guilty of getting something brand new from the shop, electrical, and you don't even bother reading the manual. So there was only 5 occurrences of where somebody felt that it was lack of familiarization, which was the the causation of the actual incident, which I think is very, very low. So okay, when we looked at the 1 year's worth of reporting, you can see there that we had 36 occurrences of 1 to 7 day absence, 100 damage to MEWPs, 49 damage to property to which there was no injury, and 120 occurrences of first aid. 1 major accident, and only 75 reported near misses. So you could easily, those of you in the safety side of things will know that you can easily put another nought and probably another nought on there in terms of near misses which were never reported. 20 over 7 day absences, so obviously the people from work, and 11 environmental incidents. I was only reading this morning that a well-known crane company who unfortunately is being believed to have dropped a significant amount of hydraulic oil in the Blackwall tunnel, is now being chased for recovering costs of the repair to the tarmac. So that council are estimating that the tarmac of about 1 kilometre of tarmac or whatever it was that they repaired, they're looking for damages of £150,000. So when environmental incidents are getting a little bit more press these days, so make sure that you've got procedures in place for clearing up spills or any incidents, certainly where waters and drains are concerned. So we'll now look a little bit more at contractor incident and accidents. And you can see from the 90 incidents that were recorded by contractors, the majority of tasks which were being carried at the time, no surprise, it was being operated from the platform controls. So we'll dig down into that in a little bit more, but strangely 18 incidents were not known, so whether or not a proper investigation was carried out or not, I'm unsure. I know Chris Wraith will do his best to try and find out what actually happened, but he's got limited resources insofar, if he hits the corporate brick wall, we're not telling you what happened, then unfortunately this is as accurate as you can actually get it. 10 occurrences came from the MEWP being either driven into things, so driven, the incident, what was it, near miss, driven close to somebody, did it hit somebody, did it hit a vehicle, did it hit, buildings and materials. We need to remember that, machines don't stop immediately once you let go of the controller. And down the bottom there you can see, although it's quite low, 3 occurrences on site for transporting the MEWP. So we can either surmise that the machine was either being lifted by crane or by a forklift at the time. It's either been dropped or damaged during that operation. So as you well know, some of you that have listened to some of my previous webinars will know that controls vary and not each machine is the same. So it's important that supervisors and managers take this into account when operators are operating machines. Now there is often sometimes this assumption that you've been trained, you can use any MEWP. Remember, training is going to train that operator on the machine that they were using on the course, and this can have vastly different controls and safety systems from the machine that you may hire for them to carry out their job. So we need time to carry out, get familiar with the machine, understand our pre-use checks, understand what safety systems are on the machine, and then get okay with the controls prior to using it. Years ago we used to have time to sort of get on with get used to the machine, but we accept today we have a much faster pace of work. And never forget, of course, we need to make sure that the emergency lowering controls work, position of them, location of them. They should always be made available, so don't put scissor lifts against the wall with the emergency lowering on the wall side. Should the should the incident occur, we need to be able to get to that emergency lowering quickly, and somebody of course needs to know how to use it from the ground position. And again, just reiterating on that, I had a meeting with a contractor the other day, and they went through this this emergency lowering procedure, and I was astounded to see that they had the report in there saying that they were going to use the emergency lowering controls at the ground, and the operator or the person at the ground was then going to rely on the operator's manual. And I think the penny finally dropped when I told him that the manual's in the platform, you ain't going to have the manual to refer to, and if again trying to find it in the manual is going to be very hard work. So we need to plan for emergencies. So operating the MEWP from the platform controls, this was highlighted as the most common incident and accident for contractors. So when operating any MEWP from the platform controls, it's always going to be imperative that they understand what the controls do and what functions prior to use. It's not simply a question of operating controls and hoping for the best. Platform controls are going to vary in manufacturer design. Some controls are going to be proportional, some controls are not. What plane, what direction do controllers move? The picture on the top there, as you can see now, okay, you've got you've got a drive lever on the left and you've got 4 controllers. You've also got an additional controller which is not on the screen, up on the top left hand side to control the tilt of the platform. The controller on the far right controls the rotation of the turntable. But this operation of this, to think if I want to rotate left and right, you would figure that this would move left and right. Well, this doesn't actually move left and right, it moves up and down. And that takes a bit of time. So to move, if I pull it down, it rotates to the left. If I push it up, it rotates to the right. And that sometimes does take a little bit of time to get into my memory bank, because I've probably been using a machine that had totally different controls, or could have been using controls an hour or so ago. So, yet we think about that machine, that is classed as relatively simple controls, as is that. But there are certainly different sort of controls that are out there. We have, in our fleet, we have one machine that has 28 controls in the upper platform, and yet the operator may have been trained on their course prior to that with a machine with 2 control paddles. So as you can see there is different things that we need to understand. So complex controls then, and again, we need to know what are the different types, and we also need to consider the behavioral aspects of the operator. Smooth operation and correct operation of the platform does take time and experience to master, not only to be precise, but also to be confident and accurate with the controls. There are many factors which we have looked at over the years in my previous roles that lead up to the incident on the MEWP. Whether you're familiar or whether you're unfamiliar with the controls. Sometimes when they are very familiar, they can be overconfident. Most operators that I've been involved with, they don't like to show any weakness, and that's understandable. Is the work being carried out in conjunction with other plant? Is the project behind time? We're having to ramp up the people on site, which then obviously then brings in other people, additional resource that may be not used to your working patterns and procedures. What about distractions or lapse in concentration? I've been to many incidents where machines have made contact with another structure or fixed object, and 99% of the time it was down to the operator not allowing and not understanding for ramping, whether that be hydraulic or electrical, ramping up and ramping down on the machine. So in other words, what I'm talking about there is a machine not slowing down and not starting up, when I press the control. Quite simple there, two buttons, one up, one down, one red emergency stop. And yet we get onto another machine there where we've got different types of controls. Quite, a very big control platform there, and quite well spread apart. And then you get the option there now where you've got another machine there with an electric dial at the top there, and different controls altogether. So we'll look at driver incident and accidents now. So without again stating the obvious there, half of the driving incidents were found to be the wrong control being used at the time. So considering the space around the driver, congested areas, ground conditions, uneven or sloping grounds always going to play a huge part in any MEWP incident. Travelling over ground needs to be done slowly and where possible with the machine lowered. Observation when operating. In the lowered position, the counterweight of the machine can obscure many hazards such as people, vehicle, ground and the terrain. So the operator will often compensate this by elevating the platform. This then can bring new hazards into play which could be far more serious, and you're going to see an unfortunate situation there, exactly what I mean. So I can't clear the materials on the ground, I've got to lift the boom off. A contributing factor when driving MEWPs considers that these are generally issues that from correct orientation of the chassis. So when I've rotated, the operator's left the machine the wrong way around, I think that forwards is forwards when actually it's backwards. Now most machines do have a function enable system, so when this happens, the machine won't drive. But now there's one manufacturer who designed a system which auto-rotates the chassis, so forwards is always forwards no matter how many degrees of rotation you have turned. So in terms of driving the MEWP, we had 11 incidents from lack of observation, 11 incidents from mechanical component, and 7 of these were inconclusive. We had 5 hydraulic hose failures on site. So when you take something like a big diesel boom, you might have 200 litres of hydraulic oil pouring out. And we had 4 occasions where the wheel actually detached from the machine. So in total there was 152 incidents. Remember, for the most of the time, these drivers were trained operators. Now most hire companies will have ensured that drivers have the necessary training for loading and unloading. There is a separate course for loading and unloading, so we put them on the operator's course, but we also put them on the loading and unloading course. Procedures should be put in place for loading and securing and ensuring the machine is suitably and safely loaded and secured before it moves off. Please remember then, a loaded machine will always move when being transported. The MEWP needs 100% restraint from moving forwards and 50% restraint from moving sidewards and rearwards. Now this is of course necessary for road safety, but also for when it's on your site. So now consider a 20-ton boom being loaded on your site. You've got a 200-300 meter haul road to get out of your site, going past other workers. So that 20 tons of restraint rearwards is necessary to prevent it from moving forwards. Should we brake, or anything happen. But now consider the tie down point, which the chain is actually tied to. That may only be rated for 5 tons. This would mean that it would require 4 times 5 ton chains to prevent it from moving forwards. So next time a delivery comes in, take time and look at how it has been secured or how it is being secured. It may surprise you. You may think that they don't actually affect your business, driver incidents. Well, I'm afraid they have the potential, because under most terms and conditions, certainly the Construction Plant Hire Association terms and conditions, when the machine is loaded, it's actually on hire to you, and it's your responsibility for the machine until it returns back to the depot. So if a machine is damaged whilst in transit, lost load, come off at a roundabout, accident, whatever, then it's your responsibility. However, in my 20 years in this industry, I've yet to see a client pay for the loss of load on the highway. But if it happened on your site, HSC's there, it could be quite a different outcome. So many of these are more self-explanatory. We've had a couple of lost canopies on the highway, and we've had a tip over a machine whilst being loaded, as I mentioned earlier, the spider tracked machine. Now that in itself, there were mitigating factors as it happened on a public highway, and this has led to some new IPAF guidance, which I'll mention a little bit later on. Okay, one tragic event from last week saw a driver fatally injured in the United States, and this is an aftermath of the picture there. So you can see it's quite a congested site. The driver arrived at site to collect a boom type machine which had been off-hired. Whilst loading the boom onto his truck on a ramp in the underground loading and unloading area, the platform is said to have risen rapidly towards the ceiling and crushed the man between the platform and the concrete beam. People on site, as you would expect, immediately rushed to his aid, but it was too late. Now, there are other information that's saying that the action of the platform going up the ramp and onto the flat trailer caused the boom to raise, and that there was insufficient headroom resulting in the incident. At this time, though, however, that's not been corroborated. So, it's a tragic, avoidable accident. The guy was 61 years old. So if we look at that in itself, it's very sad. So, main types of incidents we've had there, insecure load. We've got a machine, coming off the side of a bed there. That's, you can see there's either a house behind it or something like that. That's a public area. God forbid what could happen if, parents and children morning school run. It doesn't even begin to think about that. Okay, now I want to just bring you now into wander leading or dog walking. So what is wander leading or dog walking? So it is a common term used when a user or operator operates the upper platform controls from the ground position. Now, as an industry, we have seen quite a number of incidents, from this. So in myself, I felt it important today to go through wander leading with you. Over my year, in my years, I've come up with quite a few incidents due to this operation, and this has been various injuries to major parts of the body. I'm talking torso, feet, hands, even on one occasion the head. Ideally, on mobile type MEWPs, we should only ever use the wander leading when it's not possible to stand in the platform. So, ideally, we climb into the platform and we drive it from the platform. However, there are times when we can't do that. On track-mounted MEWPs, as you can see the picture on the right-hand side there, it's often safer to stand away from the MEWP to operate due to the narrow width of these machines. You always need to consider the length of the wander lead or the cable and determine if that enables you to stand in the safe areas. Some manufacturers' leads don't allow this and can make it at first glance so that you're very close to the machine. But again, if you're a little bit more familiar with the machine, you would know that often these controls can be removed and reconnected elsewhere on the machine, which would then enable you to stand in a much safer place. So you can see there typical platform control, and you can see there, which is a stock photo off a website of a machine there being used, and you can also get machines that are radio controlled now. So primarily you can see there used for negotiating low doorways and obstructions where it's not safe to stand in the platform. And sometimes, don't forget, we have to lower the guardrails to get them through there. Also, you might be down very tight corridors with back of house. You've got the mechanical, electrical services above you, and sometimes also loading or unloading duties that are performed by HGV drivers. Now you can see from this picture, which again is a stock picture taken off a website showing the controller being used. If you look at the fact, and you can look at the fact that the controller is not orientated to the machine in the first place. The operator is already at the front of the machine, which means then he's walked through that doorway and brought the machine towards him. Effectively, the machine, it's the wrong way around. It's basically backwards. Left is right and right is left. Now, some may argue with me that that's acceptable. He's got better vision. He's not going to run over someone. But the point I'm making here is, what's your procedures say? Should he be at the front of the machine in this situation? Should he be at the back of the machine? If he's at the back of the machine, he's still in that corridor that you can't see. but has he got somebody at the other part of, out the front, making sure that the area is clear and nobody's going to walk into it? In my view, in this situation, there, he's probably safer at the at the rear of the machine, but it does come with its own risks. If you look as well, his hands holding onto the control box, he's pushing forward and steering left, which in a second he is going to be orientated around correctly to the machine. Clearly walking next to the machine is going to be an everyday occurrence for most MEWP engineers and drivers, and it's often second nature to them. But this can and has led to incidents where engineers and drivers momentarily have forgotten about this and ran over their own feet, or push the machine into their own shin. So it could be a very painful lesson learned. Now the picture shows yours truly preparing to wander lead a Holland Lift 165. Now that's 6+ tons of machine. Now normally in this situation I'd be up in the platform, but again, I may have had to climb at the ground there, because the overhead height is not acceptable, and I've got to drop the guardrails. So the reason for putting this on there is you can see from the image the lack of vision I have from the opposite side of the machine. The size of the machine can be somewhat daunting, certainly to an operator who's never carried out this type of manoeuvre before. And I've got a question. I haven't got any option to do this. That's the only way I've got to do it. Have you carried out your risk assessment? Am I properly trained, and have I been familiarised with the location of that controller? I've basically taken the upper platform controller from the top, climbed down the steps and put it into the sort of like a slave socket umbilical cord at the bottom to use it. Now this particular machine, the steps to get into the machine are on the right hand side of the machine, and as we look at that photo, it's actually at the front, it's on the right hand side, which is the front of the machine. So operators potentially could already be slightly disorientated, because most scissor lifts you get into the machine from the back of the machine. So again, forgetting this again increases the risk of potential entrapment or crushing risk, and sadly years ago there was a fatality from this. You can see the machine just slightly to the right of my machine, so now imagine me thinking I'm standing at the back of the machine going to drive it forward, it'd actually come towards me. So getting in is always the safest option, and again should take priority, except where circumstances makes that impossible. But it is down to scalability. We've got this machine here, she's 31.2 tons gross weight. She is 7 meters long, 3 meters wide and 2.8 meters high when the guardrails have been lowered. It is perception of size, it's scale. Think about the issues around manoeuvrability. It's got 2 and 4 and crab wheel steering. Not only is this machine going to impose significant weight on the ground, but like the previous machine, the fundamental issue of a trained operator using potentially a 19-foot scissor one day to the next day preparing to operate this machine are poles apart. So again, I must emphasize that the correct training and familiarization of this platform is paramount to the safe operation. So this machine actually will, again, I would, you can see there, let's go back a slide, you can see the bottom slide there, you can see where the umbilical cord's at the bottom. So I take again the upper control box, which you can see on the top right of the machine and the guardrail, and again this is the front of the machine here where the steps are. I climb down the machine and I connect that into that point there, and then I can drive the machine. But you can, I don't have to tell you, I can't see absolutely anything the other side of me, so I would need a banksman, maybe 1 or 2 to position and maneuver something like this. You see the control box at the top there. So points to note before we wander lead then. If the decision has been made to drive the MEWP from outside the platform, then the following points must be considered. Can I avoid it? Can I avoid driving the machine from outside the platform? Is there any other way I can actually take the machine into the building? Is there any other way I can sort of navigate? Is there any narrow gaps or entrances to pass through? Years ago when I worked for a previous company, I do remember 2 people going through a doorway. The machine just fit. The first person who was driving the machine ducked but didn't tell the person behind, and that was a lady. and basically the machine drove through, and unfortunately it pinned the lady with her stomach up against the doorway, and it was serious, life-changing injuries for a lady. So again, we are going to have, we've got to communicate. Are there any busy traffic routes to pass through? So you imagine the previous machine I've just showed you, manoeuvring that through. Yeah, it is a beast. You've got to make sure that if we're traveling our machines in areas, and we've come out of one area and it's a busy traffic route, they may not even see the machine because the guardrails are lowered. Are there any sharp turns to make on the route which could increase the chances of being trapped or crushed? So again, thinking of corners and turning where we're standing, we may be stood at the side of the machine, we may be stood at the back of the machine, which may then increase the risk of actually running over ourselves. As you'll all know, often the route is not very well lit, certainly in the construction phase. So again, have I got adequate lighting along the route? Are the ground conditions capable and suitable? Are we good enough to drive that? And ensure that you're always in a position that is safe in relation to the machine is moving. So ensure that you understand that which way is forward is the way the machine is going to go. Like the picture earlier, the stock photo of the blue machine, you can see was the wrong way around. He's driven that machine forwards towards him, so effectively he's driving it backwards. Again, you don't take these sort of things on lightly. So in addition to this, remember that any sort of leads and communication to the chassis are in good condition. So check the leads, make sure they're okay. The chassis and the control panel is going to have decals, and you can see there we've got different colors for different machines. Make sure they understand what weighs which. Don't forget ramping up and ramping down. So machine hydraulic ramping, electrical ramping is the speeding up and slowing down of the motor in relation to oil and electrical energy. So we might let go of a control, but it actually won't stop immediately. The IPAF operators course is a train operators course, so we're going to train the people in how to use the machines, but also as well we need to make sure that we are fully aware of the types of machines that they are using. IPAF now offers an e-learning aspect of the course for the theory, which is is going to be useful for people who want to renew their card and also do some self-study prior to the practical session. The IPAF load and unload course for drivers. To have the driver trained to operate the machine doesn't go far enough, in my opinion. Your supplier of MEWPs should go further. Query them and see if they've had their drivers trained on the IPAF load and load or equivalent course. The IPAF MEWPs for Managers course covers what managers need to know when using MEWPs on site, and this goes from planning the job, carrying out risk assessments, selecting the right equipment, and potentially mitigating all possible risks. It's a one-day course for managers. It includes topics such as health and safety, accident, risk assessment, machine selection, rescue plans. We go through emergency lowering procedures, and the course is predominantly about planning, supervising, and effectively managing the use of powered access, and not about operating the machine. If you wish to operate the machine, you need to take the operators course. I mentioned earlier about some of the guidance, and obviously there's a HSE GEI 6, which is a great little document. You can read that. I mentioned earlier about BS 8460, which is 2005 Code of Practice, but it's currently under review. I'm led to believe that that's going to take around about 18 months with BSI, so we're probably looking at sometime October 2017 when that's available. But in the meantime, there is going to be a plethora of information on the IPAF website. So if you go to the publications, technical guidance notes, various things in there that you can that you can use. There are some new IPAF guidance. I showed you earlier and mentioned about the load and unloading fatality. That in itself spurred some new guidance. So we've now got some load and unloading best practice, and also some load and unloading on the public highway best practice. In progress at the moment, and I'm sitting on this working group, there is a MEWPs on the public highway, so we're not finished that yet. We're still working on that one at the moment. And lastly, obviously we've got a series of posters and toolbox talks. In fact, the posters are done. I think the toolbox talks are being at the moment being written, but contractors, end users and rental companies, you can download these posters. They are free and they are able to be used in daily operations. You can have them individualized to yourself. So you can see we've got examples of caution when loading and loading, familiarization, know your machine, check the ground conditions for unsafe ground, have you got a rescue plan, attach your lanyard. There's a couple more as well. I think IPAF's aims are to get a few out every couple of months. So just get a little bit closer in on some of these ones. It is part of what's called the Andy Access range, and this guy that you can see there up in the platform is a guy called Hugh Hazard. So you can see he's not having a good day, and his supervisor's telling him what we should be doing. Okay, so earlier we had a look at a few questions, and the polls in itself, 60% of you felt that the main incident in terms of in relation to reported incident that was found to be the biggest cause was lack of familiarization, and 35% of it was down to lack of observation. I can tell you that the biggest issue was actually lack of observation. So observation was the key factor in terms of just having a bit of a nightmare with Prezi here. We use a program called Prezi, which is quite sensitive sometimes, and there we are, we're back. You were correctly said that 52% of you said that the incident was on site, and again that was correct. Only 1% of incidents were in the yard. About 30% were of it actually. 25% of it was in the yard, and with the additional things there being on the in the workshop. All right, to summarise then, IPAF then called on all manufacturers, rental companies and contractors and users to report any known fatal and serious incidents involving MEWPs or mass climbing machines worldwide. So, we've gone through how you can get involved. Remember, incidents can occur anywhere from site, yard to a workshop or railway. People should always make sure that you understand the controls on the platform, the ground controls and the emergency lowering. We should always operate the MEWP from the platform controls, and this is the most, but we've seen from the wander leading point of view that we do have issues when people are using the machine from the ground conditions. So we need to be mindful of narrow gaps and entrances, busy traffic routes, sharp turns, any defects and malfunctions and lightings. Now the next webinar is scheduled for July. And the next webinar is scheduled for July, and that is going to be on AFI familiarization films. So we'll be keeping you updated on that one. And we now have Q&A. I don't know if there is any questions that have been asked. I've got a question from Colin here. Our MEWP supplier straps down with 2 straps per machine. Is this sufficient? Remember earlier I mentioned about the weight that's got to be restrained. You've got to make sure that the machine has got 100% restraint, and in terms of 100% for moving forwards. So, and what we're saying there is, if the machine is 10 tons, it will need 10 tons of restraint at least from providing it from moving forwards. If the machine is that, then it will need 5 tons moving prevention from side to side. So 2 straps in most occasions will not be sufficient. Michael's asked who is responsible to provide MEWP familiarization. Now in terms of familiarization, as we well know that the employer's responsibility for providing adequate training. It is also the employee's responsibility to ensure that familiarisation is carried out. How you look at that, is entirely up to yourselves in terms of your company. But again, some companies will have their people trained to IPAF demonstrator standard.